and welcome back to Something to Noodle On. I'm your host, Mac, an average 30-something exploring the complex questions that keep us awake at night. Before we get into today's topic, ND and I have decided to try out uploading on Wednesdays instead of Saturdays. So be on the lookout for new episodes midweek. And if you like what you're hearing, give us a thumbs up because apparently that appeases the pod gods and helps us be seen and heard by more listeners. Anyway, lately I've been thinking about artificial intelligence. Not in a sci-fi, killer robots taking over the world kind of way, but in a much more mundane, everyday kind of sense. AI has worked its way into so many parts of our lives so quickly that it barely even feels remarkable anymore. And that got me wondering, is AI really all that bad? Or are we just uncomfortable with how fast it's changing the lives we live? That question feels worth unpacking, so let's explore it this week on Something to Noodle On. But before we get too far, let's make sure we're all starting from the same place. For the purposes of this discussion, when we talk about AI, we're not talking about conscious machines with feelings, intentions, or moral judgment. We're talking about today's narrow AI, or the AI systems trained on massive data sets to recognize patterns and generate responses based on probability. This type of AI doesn't think, it doesn't understand, and it definitely doesn't want anything. It predicts, it calculates, it responds based on what it's seen before. And while that can feel incredibly human at times, it's important to remember that what's happening under the hood is math, statistics, and pattern recognition, not awareness. One of the easiest ways to see narrow AI in action is through recommendation systems, the kind most of us interact with dozens of times a day without even thinking about it. When a streaming service suggests a new show or a music app builds you a playlist that somehow nails your mood, i.e. Spotify's day list, it can feel almost intuitive. But what's actually happening is much less magical. The system is looking at what you've watched or listened to, how long you stayed, what you skipped, what people with similar habits did next, and then predicting what might keep you engaged. It doesn't know why you like something. It doesn't understand nostalgia, comfort, or curiosity. It makes a probability-based guess. The same is true for things like email spam filters, autocorrect, predictive text, or navigation apps that reroute you around traffic. None of these systems understand context the way humans do. They recognize patterns extremely well, and because humans are creatures of habit, those patterns often line up closely with our behavior. That's why narrow AI can feel so personal, even though there's no personal awareness behind it at all. Is true awareness right around the corner? Maybe, but for now, let's just consider AI with its current limitations. It's no lie that AI is everywhere. It has infiltrated almost every area of our lives, from work and school to our personal lives to even our intimate relationships. This wide accessibility makes it feel more powerful than ever. Tools that were once limited to research labs or massive corporations are now sitting in our pockets, embedded in apps, websites, and software we use every day. And not always in ways we consciously register. AI shows up when your phone unlocks using your face, when your credit card flags a suspicious charge, or when your map app predicts traffic before it even happens. It's there when customer service chats respond instantly, when photos are automatically sorted by who's in them, and when search engines finish your question before you've typed the last word. It's embedded in grocery stores that track inventory in real time, in smart thermostats that learn your habits, and in social platforms that decide which posts rise to the top and which quietly disappear. Even things like pricing airline tickets, ride shares, hotel rooms are often adjusted dynamically by algorithms responding to demand patterns in real time. What's notable is that none of these feel like using AI, in a deliberate way anyway. These systems are layered so seamlessly into daily life that they register as background noise. It's just how things work. And even more so for the generations born directly into it. Unlike Gen X and Boomers who saw the way the world was before the internet took over every aspect of our lives. And because these interactions are small and fragmented, they rarely feel significant on their own. It's just one recommendation, one autofill, one optimized route doesn't seem worth questioning. But collectively, they shape how we move through the world, what we notice, what we're offered, what we never even see. That's part of what makes AI so different from past technological shifts. It doesn't arrive as a single tool we pick up and put down. It's an entire ecosystem that quietly adapts around us. At work, it helps us generate ideas, organize information, summarize meetings, draft emails, and automate repetitive tasks. Things that used to take hours can now take minutes, sometimes even seconds. And what's interesting is how quickly that shift happened. Most of us didn't sit down one day and decide, I'm going to start relying on AI now. It just sort of showed up, one helpful feature at a time. One suggested shortcut, one little button promising to save us some effort, and in many cases, AI often feels like a neutral upgrade or a smarter version of tools we were already using. Instead of staring at a blank page, we get a jumping off point. Instead of digging through notes, we get a clean summary. And instead of juggling a dozen small tasks, we hand them off to a machine that doesn't get tired or distracted. But that sense of neutrality doesn't always hold up emotionally. For a lot of us, bringing AI into the workplace comes with a quiet, lingering fear. If this tool can do part of my job faster than I can, what does that say about my value? Even when AI is positioned as assistive, it's hard not to wonder whether we're being helped or slowly replaced. There's also the reality that adopting AI at work isn't always smooth or empowering. Often, we are expected to integrate these tools without training, clear guidelines, or realistic expectations. Leadership may see AI output as polished and efficient, while we, the people using it daily, see the gaps, the missed nuance, the confident inaccuracies, and the lack of context. That can create a strange dynamic where workers are not only doing their jobs, but also supervising AI, correcting it, and quietly compensating for what it gets wrong, all while being told how much time it's supposed to save. It's hard not to be resentful when AI seems like it's causing extra work that could have been done correctly the first time by a human. At the same time, when AI does reduce busy work, it can genuinely help people feel more human at work. Fewer repetitive tasks can mean more room for creativity, problem solving, or simply breathing between meetings. The tension lives in that middle space between relief and anxiety, or empowerment and unease. I think as a creator, we have this love-hate relationship with AI. Yes, it's a tool that can speed up a workflow, but at what cost? A hired contractor is no longer getting paid, and that just feels bad. I personally use AI for small things. How to respond to a specific email, backstories for my D&D character, and preparing for job interview questions in various fields. I've even used it to suggest other fields my background might apply to, and how to reframe my experience to fit the career I'm looking for. It has a way of seeing things that aren't always obvious to the user. In our personal lives, AI can show up in quieter, more intimate ways. It helps us journal when we don't know how to start. It organizes our schedules, reminds us to drink water, nudges us to move our bodies, and sometimes even helps us process our emotions. For people who struggle with structure, focus, or mental load, that kind of support can feel genuinely life-changing. Therapy is expensive, but ChatGPT is right there. My friends might be asleep at 4 a.m., but this AI chatbot is available 24/7. And with how fast our lives move, we welcome subtle conveniences like this. I've even used AI to ask for advice in my personal life, especially when navigating issues that couldn't wait until my weekly therapy appointment. And you know what? The advice was actually really good. It helped reframe things in my mind and gave examples of how to push forward. I can see why Gen Z uses it for conflict de-escalation advice. But there's a flip side to all this convenience. When a tool makes something easier, it also makes it tempting for us to over-rely on it. And that's where the questions start to form. If AI is always there to think with us, or perhaps think for us, how often are we actually addressing our own thoughts and feelings? And it may be kind of awkward to think about, but AI can have a place in our interpersonal relationships too. I have friends, myself included, who have consulted AI to help organize their thoughts and feelings before bringing up sensitive topics in their romantic lives. It not only helps them communicate clearly, it also helps keep them grounded, making them less likely to lose their temper or say something they might regret. Plus, AI companions, chatbots, and dating tools are getting better at mimicking empathy and attention. For people who feel lonely, misunderstood, or burned out on human connection, that can feel comforting, safe even. But comfort isn't the same thing as connection. And while AI can simulate responsiveness, it can't truly reciprocate vulnerability, accountability, or growth. At some point, we have to ask whether these tools are supplementing our relationships or just quietly replacing the messier parts of being human. The tricky thing here is the more helpful AI becomes, the more invisible it feels. We start to experience it as a feature instead of a system, something abstract rather than something built, powered, and maintained. And when something fades into the background of daily life, we stop asking how it works, what it requires, and who carries the burden of keeping it running. Convenience has a way of smoothing over complexity, and AI is very, very convenient. AI is in places we cannot see. One of the easiest things to forget about AI is that it isn't weightless or abstract. Even though it lives behind screens and inside apps, it relies on very real, very physical infrastructure. These are massive data centers packed with endless servers running nonstop, like the Iron Mountain Data Center in New Jersey, for example, which is roughly the size of Buckingham Palace, just FYI. So just imagine the Queen of England sitting on the throne surrounded by computer processors and storage towers. And these data centers also require constant electricity and massive cooling systems, often using millions of gallons of water to prevent overheating. These facilities are frequently built in places where energy is cheap and water is accessible, which often means they're in rural areas or communities with limited influence over how those local resources are used. In some cases, natural land is cleared, ecosystems are disrupted, and infrastructure is redirected to support global technology demands. From our perspective, AI interaction feels instant and effortless. We ask a question, we get an answer. No smoke, no sparks, no visible cost. And because there's no immediate feedback telling us otherwise, it's easy to assume the impact is negligible. And while the environmental impact isn't always visible to the people benefiting from AI, it is very real to the places hosting it. And that raises an uncomfortable question. Are we trading physical landscapes, the places people live, work, and find beauty, for digital convenience? And let's not forget scale changes everything. One AI request doesn't seem like much, but multiply that by millions of people, millions of times per day, and suddenly the footprint gets a lot harder to ignore. The energy and water demands compound quickly, and those costs don't always show up where the benefits are felt. They show up in power grids, in water usage, and in communities far removed from the people tapping generate. The convenience of instant answers and automated tools comes with heavy environmental and resource costs that we simply can't see from where we're sitting. And what makes this especially tricky is that AI isn't unique in this problem. Streaming, cloud storage, social media, all of those modern conveniences live in similar data centers with similar hidden costs. And so many of us have embraced them, making them a daily part of our lives. AI just accelerates this issue because of how computationally intense it can be. This isn't about assigning guilt or saying we should stop using the tools altogether. But for people like me who try to make environmentally aware decisions, AI introduces a very real internal conflict. If you're someone who recycles diligently, limits water use, thinks about energy consumption, or tries to reduce your digital footprint, it's hard not to feel uneasy about embracing a technology that quietly demands so many resources behind the scenes. The benefits are obvious and immediate, of course, but the environmental costs are difficult to reconcile with values centered on sustainability. So the question becomes less about whether AI is worth the cost and more about whether the cost is negotiable. Would we feel differently about AI if its energy use were reduced, its infrastructure made more sustainable, or its growth more intentional? Is resistance really about the technology itself, or is it about the sense that we're being asked to accept progress without being given meaningful ways to reduce its impact? Maybe our discomfort isn't rooted in fear of AI overlords taking over. But maybe it's rooted in the feeling that convenience keeps winning out over our responsibility to take care of our home. And that's hard for some of us to ignore. All of this leads to a deeper shift in the conversation. Once we acknowledge both the visible benefits and the invisible costs of AI, it's hard not to turn the question inward. Not just what AI is doing to the world, but what it's doing to us. Is AI making us better or just more comfortable? With all the convenience AI affords, it's easy to become dependent on it. But should we? On one hand, AI is an incredible tool. It lowers barriers, boosts productivity, and gives people access to knowledge and capabilities they might never have had otherwise. Used thoughtfully, it can enhance creativity, support learning, and free up mental energy for more meaningful work. But let's play devil's advocate for a minute. If AI is doing the thinking for us, taking care of all the writing, problem solving, remembering, and deciding, what happens to those skills over time? If we no longer struggle through the rough drafts, the trial and error, and the frustration, are we actually learning anything? Or are we simply outsourcing effort and calling it progress? Education is a perfect example of this. Students today have access to AI tools that can outline essays, generate thesis statements, summarize readings, and even draft full responses to exam questions in seconds. And side note for all the students using it this way, I saw a TikTok showcasing new technology that can detect if AI was used down to the percentage of changed words. So don't think you can get away with it writing an essay and you just swapping a few things around. From a purely outcome-based perspective, the work might look fine, sometimes even impressive, but that raises a deeper question. If a student turns in a polished essay they didn't struggle through, did learning actually happen? Traditionally, writing an essay wasn't just about the final product. It was about wrestling with ideas, organizing thoughts, hitting dead ends, revising arguments, and slowly clarifying what you believe. That friction, the discomfort of not knowing what to say at first, was literally the point. When AI removes that friction, it can also remove the cognitive work that builds understanding. The concern isn't quite so much that students are being dishonest, although AI usage can definitely be seen as cheating in many cases. is that they might be bypassing the very process that helps information stick. At the same time, completely banning AI in academic settings may be unrealistic. These tools are already embedded in the world students are preparing to enter. So some educators are asking a different question. Instead of trying to prevent AI use altogether, should we be rethinking how we measure learning? If AI can draft an essay, maybe essays shouldn't be the sole proof of comprehension anymore. Maybe learning needs to be demonstrated through discussion, reflection, application, or creative synthesis. You know, the things that require personal insight, not just coherent output. So, should we restrict access in order to preserve traditional learning methods? Or do we accept that AI is here to stay and innovate new ways of teaching that emphasize understanding over production? Because if education becomes more about generating the right looking answer than developing the ability to think critically, question assumptions, and form original ideas, then efficiency may come at a cost of depth. The funny thing is, the argument about whether or not we just accept technological innovation isn't new at all. We've been here before, most notably during the Industrial Revolution of the 17 and 1800s, when machines entered factories. Automation reshaped labor, and entire industries were transformed almost overnight. At the time, there was real fear. Fear of job loss, fear of skill erosion, fear that machines would make human effort irrelevant. And in some ways, those fears weren't wrong. Certain jobs disappeared. Certain skills stopped being valuable. Life changed in ways we couldn't fully predict. But new kinds of work emerged too. New skills became important. Society adapted. Not without pain, not without disruption, but it adapted. Some argue that AI is simply the next speed bump on our path of technological advancement. Once we get over it, it's smooth sailing for a bit. But others worry that this time feels different. Not because AI can replace physical labor and human workers, but also because it can replace cognitive effort. And cognitive effort is where the hallmarks of humanity live: identity, creativity, and critical thinking. Things that set us apart from artificial intelligence because they demand real intelligence. AI can do so much more than analyze data or perform complex calculations. It drafts, it analyzes, it interprets, and it decides. And beyond that, AI now creates. We're firmly in the era of generative AI, with systems capable of producing images, videos, music, essays, scripts, and even full-length books from simple prompts. For now, we can usually tell when something is AI generated. There are telltale signs: hands with too many fingers, strange lighting, impossible physics, writing that feels polished but oddly hollow. Here's the unsettling part. Every time we correct those mistakes, the systems learn. Each prompt that says fix this or make it more realistic closes the gap between imitation and authenticity. What looks obviously artificial today may look indistinguishable from human work tomorrow. And that's where discomfort starts to deepen. If AI can replicate not just effort, but style, voice, and creative expression, how do we define originality? How do we decide what has value and why? The fear isn't just about replacement, it's about erosion, about the slow blurring of lines between human creation and machine output. If we hand over too much of that mental work, are we changing how we think in a fundamental way? When struggle, uncertainty, and effort are removed from the process, do we lose something essential? Not just skills, but perspective. Is our fear truly that humans will become obsolete, replaced by their robot counterparts? Or is it that we'll become passive participants in our own thinking lives? Once we start asking these questions, it becomes clear that this isn't just a debate about technology. It's a philosophical conversation about agency, responsibility, and what we want to preserve as distinctly human. So where do we draw the line? Is using AI to speed things up smart or lazy? Is outsourcing effort to computers just logical evolution, or is it worth the negative impact on our environment? Is it worth the cost of depth, understanding, and personal growth we might be sacrificing? Finding the answers to these questions isn't easy. There may not be any clear answers at all, but sitting with this uncertainty for a bit might not be a bad thing overall. Maybe we can find a way forward that makes our lives easier without all the sacrifice. I think the important thing to remember is that AI doesn't have to be a villain, but it also shouldn't be seen as a savior of humanity either. It's simply a tool, one with enormous environmental impact and very real cognitive trade-offs. But the danger may not be in what AI can do, but in how uncritically we allow it to do it for us. Because for now, progress with AI technology shows no signs of slowing down. The choice we still have is how much of ourselves and our environment we hand over in the process. I hope this week's episode gave you something to noodle on, whether it's how much AI is ingrained in your own life without even realizing it, or how you plan to move with the times as technology continues to evolve. For this week, I'd like for you to noodle on ways AI is used in your life and if you feel like you've given a part of yourself up in the process. Join the discussion on Discord or reach us on social media at A Pod to Noodle On. Until next time, bye!